Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Okay. I'm getting a little bit more sophisticated here. I'm also like creating notes for myself. So like when I do these things, I always have all these points in my head that I wanna hit. And sometimes I don't hit them. I'm like, wait, I wanted to say that thing. So I'm using notes now. Notes from the circus to remember all the things I want to talk about. So I'm gonna try and be a little more organized. I've been trying to do that the last few videos. So, well, it's 1:16 p.m. here in the afternoon here in beautiful Southern California. Sun's high, the light's clear, and I think I can see clearly now. The rain's gone, right? Rainy season's over. I've spent years trying to understand opposing viewpoints because I believe deeply in the power of genuine debate. I've extended good faith to people I've disagreed with because I thought honest intellectual exchange could bridge differences. You know, I've read their books, I've engaged their arguments, I've tried to steel man their positions even when I found them wanting. But today, I'm done giving liars the benefit of the doubt. I'm done. I'm done with that. Today, I want to talk about this piece I just published called The Well-Dressed Liars of the Moderate Right. And I want to explain why I'm done treating these people like they deserve anything other than complete contempt. That's a strong statement, but you've seen the news, or maybe you haven't. But the Trump administration just announced that all foreign students seeking study may have to undergo social media vetting. These aren't suspected terrorists, right? These aren't people on watch lists. These are students, kids who want to get an education, young dumb people who haven't like figured out the world yet. So, I mean, it's clear, right? They're looking for people who might have posted a Palestinian flag on Instagram or retweeted something critical of Israel. I mean, this is going to get you denied a student visa. Any as Marco Rubio and others have made clear, any participation in campus protests will get you removed from the United States. Like really, like that. I mean, this is ideological screening. This is thought policing. This is state censorship. And it's exactly what the Wall Street Journal editorial board, the think tank intellectuals, and these reasonable conservatives assured us would never happen because Republicans actually understand free speech, unlike those authoritarian campus leftists. So how's that working out? How's that working out? I don't think it's working out very good, right? Let's be specific about what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the federal government examining the political beliefs, associations, and the expressions of young people seeking higher education in America. We're talking about bureaucrats in the State Department offices deciding whether a teenager's Instagram post about Palestinian solidarity qualifies them from studying engineering at MIT. We're talking about creating a database of political thought for foreign students that would make the Stasi proud. That's what we're doing. This isn't some theoretical concern about government overreach. This is actually happening right now, government overreach of the most chilling kind. The state is examining the content of people's political expression and using it to determine access to educational opportunities. If this isn't a textbook example of ideological screening, if this isn't exactly the kind of authoritarian practice that free societies are supposed to reject, then words have no meaning. I wrote this piece because I'm done pretending that people operated in good faith. I'm done treating their elaborate rationalizations as serious intellectual work. I'm done acting like they were making difficult choices based on principled analysis when they were actually just providing sophisticated cover for authoritarianism. And speaking of providing cover for authoritarianism, let me tell you about another fucking disgrace that captures what these people really are. The National Review, they came at me, this supposed flagship of principled conservatism. I mean, they published earlier this editorial that literally provided a roadmap for executive defiance of judicial orders. They outlined scenarios I wrote about this, right? That where the president might actually have. I think I have my notes here, right? What do they say? I'd had this for my show notes. Yeah, yes, that the executive may make a persuasive case for defying a judicial order. This isn't constitutional analysis. This is a how-to guide for dismantling judicial review while pretending to defend constitutional principles. Let me actually read you what they actually wrote, because specificity matters here. Like they suggested that executives might justifiably defy court orders when judges issue, quote, nationwide injunctions that lack the constitutional or statutory foundation, or when courts substitute their policy for those of the elected branches. This isn't legal analysis. It's a template for any executive who wants to ignore inconvenient judicial decisions. Under this framework, every administration can simply declare the court orders they don't like are constitutionally unfounded and ignore them. I mean, think about what this actually means in practice. It means the executive branch gets to decide when judicial decisions are legitimate, and or which ones are legitimate and which aren't. It means court orders are suggestions rather than binding legal requirements. It means the rule of law exists only when convenient for those in power. This isn't constitutional government. It's constitutional anarchy with intellectual window dressing. When Chief John Roberts has the audacity to speak the truth, that impeachment isn't an appropriate response to disagreeing with judicial decisions, the National Review scolded him for speaking the truth. They scolded the Chief Justice of the United States for defending the basic principle of constitutional governance. These self-appointed guardians of the Constitution are lecturing the Chief Justice about defending the Constitution while providing intellectual cover for its destruction. Think about the audacity of that. The Chief Justice states the most basic constitutional principle, that you don't threaten to impeach judges for making decisions you don't like. And the National Review scolds him. They scolded him for speaking truth about constitutional government, how constitutional government is supposed to work. They essentially told the Chief Justice to shut up and let the executive branch threaten judicial independence without interference. And Dan McLaughlin, he wrote a whole piece shooting back at me, right, when I criticized them for this. This is the same publication that spent decades positioning itself as the guardian of conservative constitutional principles. The same magazine that warned about liberal judicial activism and the importance of respecting the separation of powers. And now they're providing the intellectual frameworks for executive defiance of judicial authority while scolding the Chief Justice for defending judicial independence. I remember, I've sat at dinners with some of these people who work in think tanks, over the years, and I've had people just casually justify Trump's actions they're just policy disagreements. These are just policy disagreements, and I've pushed back. How is asking state officials to find votes something that can be characterized as normal political discourse? These people will launch into elaborate explanations about how Democrats have done similar things, how the system was already broken, how Trump was just playing by the rules that others had established. This is what they say. These people don't care about principles. They care about their invitations to cocktail parties. They care about maintaining their status within conservative circles more than they care about maintaining constitutional governance. They've constructed elaborate intellectual frameworks that allow them to rationalize anything as long as it serves their tribal interests while maintaining their self-image as principled thinkers. People want me to lower the mic. Well, anyways, I was saying, this is what sophisticated fraud looks like in practice. It's not crude denial or obvious lying. It's the construction of elaborate analytical frameworks that allow you to justify whatever you need to justify, while maintaining the appearance of intellectual rigor. It's the art of making authoritarianism sound reasonable through careful deployment of both sides' equivalencies and procedural complexities. Now, these people will say I'm biased, that I've somehow ignored the authoritarianism on the left. I haven't. I've called out progressive speech codes, campus authoritarianism, and ideological conformity consistently. I've criticized diversity training that becomes ideological indoctrination. I've opposed efforts to deplatform speakers based on political views. I've written extensively about the problems of progressive orthodoxy in academic and cultural institutions. I mean, I risk pissing people off saying these things all the time, and I know that my readership skews very left, but moral consistency means opposing authoritarianism wherever we find it, especially when it wears your colors. That's exactly what these people refuse to do. They've spent years constructing a false equivalence between campus speech codes and federal thought policing, between diversity training and ideological screening of foreign students, between progressive orthodoxy and state censorship. So, let's talk about what being partisan looks like. Partisan is when you defend authoritarianism because your team is doing it. Partisan is when you abandon every principle you claim to hold because it serves your political interests. Partisan is when you rationalize state censorship as national security because the right people are in charge. Partisan is when you scold the Chief Justice for speaking the truth about constitutional governance. Partisan is when you provide roadmaps for executive defiance of judicial orders while pretending to defend the Constitution. I'm not being partisan, I'm being consistent. What I do is called empathy, love, coherent thought, truth, not status maintenance, not rationalization. These people aren't objective, they're frauds who want to maintain their social status while satiating their broken conscience. I talk about love as an epistemic force. I think it's crucial to understanding why these people have failed so catastrophically. Love as an epistemic force means approaching reality with sustained carrying attention rather than through the lens of political calculation. It means asking what actually serves human flourishing rather than what serves my position. It means being willing to see clearly even when seeing is inconvenient or politically costly. When you approach the question of ideological screening through love as an epistemic force, the answer is immediately clear. This policy will harm young people seeking education. It will chill academic freedom. It will damage Americans' relationship with academic institutions worldwide. It will create a climate of fear among students and scholars. It will undermine the very intellectual openness that makes American universities valuable in the first place. You don't need sophisticated policy analysis to recognize this. You need the capacity to imagine how it feels to be a brilliant young person whose educational opportunities are destroyed because they express solidarity with Palestinians on social media. You need the empathy to understand how this policy will affect not just the students directly targeted, but every foreign student who now has to self-censor their political expression to maintain their visa status. These well-dressed liars of the moderate right never understood this. For years, they ran their elegant con by pointing to campus deplatformings and diversity training and progressive speech codes saying, see, the real threat to free speech comes from the left. We're the ones who actually defend intellectual freedom. And you know what? Some of their critiques had merit. Campus leftists can be authoritarian. Progressive institutions do suppress dissent. I'm not defending that because I apply my standards consistently. But that was never their point. The point was to establish themselves as a reasonable alternative while they built the infrastructure for something infinitely worse. The point was to say, trust us with power because we understand what freedom really means. While they prepared to implement ideological conformity that would make any campus speech code look like would make it look quaint by comparison. They constructed what I would call a sophisticated bait and switch operation. They used legitimate concerns about progressive authoritarianism to build credibility as defenders of intellectual freedom. They positioned themselves as the adults in the room who understood the real threats to free speech. They accumulated moral authority by correctly identifying problems with campus orthodoxy, and then they used that moral authority to provide cover for state censorship that dwarfs anything happening on college campuses. This is how their intellectual fraud operates. They establish credibility by being right about some things, and then they use that credibility to provide cover for much worse things. They create false equivalencies that allow people to feel principled while supporting the unprincipled. They construct elaborate analytical frameworks that make authoritarian policy sound like reasonable responses to legitimate concerns. Here's what coherence looks like. You oppose authoritarianism wherever you find it. You don't excuse it when your side does it. You don't rationalize it when it serves your interests. You maintain the same moral standards regardless of political convenience. You don't provide roadmaps for executive defiance of judicial orders and then pretend you're defending the Constitution. You don't scold the Chief Justice for speaking basic constitutional truth. And what did these people deliver instead? They told us Trump would be better for free speech. He implemented federal thought policing. They told us Trump would be better for free markets. He's implementing massive trade tariffs and industrial policy that they were opposed to. We can talk about industrial policy, but his industrial policy is kleptocracy. They told us Trump would be better for the free world. He's systematically undermining our democratic alliances. They were wrong about everything. Not slightly wrong. Like, they were catastrophically wrong. Let's talk about how wrong they were. The trade war demonstrates the comprehensive nature of their intellectual failure. These people spent decades arguing that Republican governance would protect free market principles against democratic interventionism. They warned about industrial policy, government picking winners and losers, trade protectionism, regulatory capture. What have we gotten? Massive tariffs on American consumers, industrial policy that picks winners and losers based on political considerations rather than market efficiency, trade wars that disrupt global supply chains and hurt American businesses, immigration restrictions that create labor shortages and drive up costs, regulatory capture by industries that support the regime, the weaponization of antitrust enforcement against companies that don't toe the political line. This isn't free market capitalism. This is crony capitalism with nationalist characteristics. It's exactly the kind of government interference in markets that conservatives supposedly oppose. But these people have found ways to justify all of it. They discovered that industrial policy was actually good when Republicans do it. They invented elaborate theories about how tariffs were strategic rather than protectionist. They convinced themselves that immigration restrictions were necessary for economic security rather than admissions that they'd abandoned free market principles. The same pattern applies to their predictions about foreign policy. They told us that Trump would be better for the free world than his Democratic opponents, better for our allies. The Wall Street Journal editorial board said this. Better for democracy globally, better for American leadership. They constructed elaborate arguments that Trump's approach would be stronger than Harris's. They actually said that she would do more to damage the liberal international order than Trump would. They said that. The Wall Street Journal editorial board said that. What we've gotten is a systematic undermining of NATO and other alliance structures, the abandonment of human rights as a foreign policy priority, the cozying up to authoritarian leaders, the destruction of America's credibility, the encouragement of authoritarianism globally. Every single prediction they made about Trump's foreign policy impact has been wrong. Not slightly wrong, not wrong in emphasis, but fundamentally wrong. Catastrophically wrong about the trajectory of American engagement in the world. They promised that Trump would strengthen American leadership. They've delivered American isolation. They promised that he would strengthen democratic alliances. Instead, we've gotten their systematic weakening. Let's talk about Brett Stevens. I mean, this is a man that spent years in the New York Times making the case that Trump, for all his flaws, was still a better choice for intellectual freedom than progressives. He agonized in print about the difficult trade offs. He performed elaborate intellectual theater, treating support for an obvious authoritarian like it was painful but principled decision based on careful analysis. He made it sound, he made it seem like a close call right up until the very end, only backing Harris at the 11th hour like he was doing us some great favor. You know, this is what he wrote in 2020. Let me find this. I've never voted for Donald Trump, but I can imagine scenarios where I'd sooner vote for Donald Trump than some of his Democratic opponents. This wasn't reluctant support. This was someone keeping his options open for supporting an obvious authoritarian because he found Democratic positions on some issues objectionable. Stevens wrote extensively about the threat that progressive activists pose to free speech on college campuses, while treating Trump's threats to democratic institutions as mere boorishness or poor character. He could write thousands of words about the danger of campus speech codes while dismissing Trump's attacks on the press, the judiciary, the democratic norms that he casually disregards as unfortunate but not disqualifying personal failings. You know what Trump was the whole time, Brett? You know what this movement represented? But you spent years providing intellectual cover for it anyways, treating fascism like it was just another policy position to be weighed against tax rates. You turned authoritarianism into a dinner party topic while people's lives hung in the balance. That's not principled analysis. That's sophisticated cowardice dressed up as intellectual rigor. The Wall Street Journal editorial board has followed the same pattern. They consistently argued that Republican governance would protect intellectual freedom better than Democratic policies that they would characterize as authoritarian overreach. They positioned themselves as the defenders of classical liberalism against progressive authoritarianism. They warned about the dangers of government interference in markets while supporting a candidate whose economic policies represented exactly that kind of interference. Their editorials, endorsements, and opinion pieces created elaborate frameworks for why supporting Trump was actually the principal choice for defenders of free markets and free speech. They constructed false equivalencies between progressive policies they disagreed with and Trump's authoritarian impulses. They treated his attacks on democratic institutions as character flaws rather than disqualifying threats to constitutional governance. Where's your editorial acknowledging that you were wrong? Where's your recognition that you enabled exactly the opposite of what you claim to defend? Where's your admission that your sophisticated analysis was either catastrophically incompetent or deliberately dishonest? Where's this intellectual honesty you claim to be championing? From the censorious progressive left. I mean, the National Review editors literally wrote a blueprint for how executives can justify defying judicial orders. They provided constitutional cover for constitutional destruction. They lectured the Chief Justice about defending the Constitution while normalizing its abandonment. And when the Chief Justice spoke constitutional truth, they scolded him for it. They scolded him for doing his job, for defending the most basic principles of constitutional governance. That's what they did. So, that's where we are. You know, I have a request, I think. Stop giving these people your attention, your clicks, your subscriptions. Stop legitimizing their lies. I mean, by treating them as intellectual equals. Your attention is their oxygen. Deny it to them. When Brett Stevens writes his next agonized column about difficult choices, don't read it. When the Wall Street Journal editorial board explains why authoritarianism is actually principled conservatism, don't share it. When the National Review provides roadmaps for constitutional destruction, don't engage with it as serious analysis. These people have proven they cannot be trusted to provide honest analysis when it matters. They've shown that they will abandon any principle, rationalize any position, and provide cover for any abuse of power, as long as it advances their position, their social position. I mean, their social status. That's what they care about, right? Ultimately. I mean, that's what this is really all about. This is status seeking behavior. The solution isn't just to ignore them. I mean, we need to actively build alternatives. We need to support intellectuals and institutions that demonstrate genuine commitment to truth over tribal loyalty. We need to create spaces where honest analysis can flourish without the distorting pressures of political tribalism and status anxiety. But we need to develop our own capacity for moral judgment rather than deferring to people who have proven themselves unworthy of trust. We need to trust our immediate moral perceptions while refining them through honest engagement with reality. We need to maintain coherent principles even when it's politically inconvenient. This isn't anti-intellectual. This is pro-intellectual in the deepest sense. Real intellectual work requires the courage to follow the truth wherever it leads, even when it contradicts your priors, threatens your positions, or alienates your tribe. These people have demonstrated they lack this courage. They've chosen comfort over truth, status over principle, tribal loyalty over intellectual integrity. The stakes here go beyond getting the right policy outcomes. They go to the heart of whether we can maintain the intellectual foundations necessary for democratic self-governance. If we can't distinguish between honest analysis and sophisticated fraud, if we can't recognize authoritarianism when it's dressed up in constitutional language, if we can't trust our own moral perceptions when they conflict with expert opinion, then democracy becomes impossible. These people have forfeited the right to be taken seriously. They forfeited the moment that they chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. They revealed themselves as frauds who care more about maintaining their social status than defending the principles they claim to believe in. People who spend years waning or warning, these people who have spent years sounding the alarm about authoritarianism while building it are not principled. They're authoritarians with better marketing. These people had their chance to prove they believed in the principles they claimed to defend. Instead, they proved they were always sophisticated liars who used legitimate concerns about campus authoritarianism, and there are some legitimate concerns there, but they used those concerns as props to build something infinitely worse. So the sun is high here in Southern California. And I think I can see clearly right now. These people are not our allies. They're not our guides, and they're certainly not our intellectual authorities. They're well-dressed frauds who got caught. I'm done pretending otherwise. And I'm happy to take some questions or some comments. I don't know how long I've been talking. 30 minutes? Jesus. Let me see. I got the comments, the chat's up. Happy to try and respond live to anything. I already got some stuff in here. Actually, we can look at this. Well, we have at least one annoying person in here that I'm not going to respond to. Adam says they care more about their bump stocks and Glock switches and lowered suppressor taxes more than they do the lives of innocent people being slaughtered daily in mass shootings, other than random or other targeted acts of violence. They never cared about anything or anyone other than themselves. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'll get into the gun debate at some point. But yeah, I mean, like the moral failures on the right are, I mean, they're prodigious in scope. It's 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 a lot. I mean, you can have a principled position, right, on like gun ownership. It's fine, but defend it. And honestly, like, and honestly, if you're willing to deal with the externalities, the chaos that comes from unregulated firearm access, then own it. Own it. Say you're okay with it. Is AI influencing? I mean, AI is influencing all of us, right? I mean, AI has been influencing us for a long time. LB Bowen asks this question. I mean, I mean, this is part of the problem, right? We've been swept up in algorithmic reality now for a decade, right? Like, the advertisements you see, right? The things you see on your feed on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, right? These are all like AI engagement algorithms, and they've been deciding what we see for quite some time. So AI has been affecting how we all think a lot, and it's affecting us more and more as we move into this scary AI age. And it's this is like kind of central to the work that I'm trying to do. And the dangers, right, of the algorithm, the dangers of like sort of putting ourselves into this simulation. I've like played around in some of my writing around sort of the mythology of the Matrix to kind of like really demonstrate these things. Like we're not like literally like plugged in, in this solipsistic sort of brain in a vat simulation like in the Matrix, but in some respects like we are, right? Like through our connection to reality through these little screens that we keep in our pockets and stare at all day. We've done this very large experiment on humanity in the form of social media, in the form of algorithmic content, and it's been a dramatic failure. If you look at the results of this experiment, the increased suicide rates among young girls, the loneliness crisis, the sex recession, the crisis of young boys, the amount of like social maladies that have come out of this social media age are so overwhelming, so destabilizing to our culture. It has to be said that this has been a failure, and the people that brought this about, I think in most cases were good people. Like I think, I don't think that the early creators of social media in Silicon Valley, and I know some of them personally. I think they thought that this would be good, that it would improve free speech, that it would democratize access to information. I mean, we all believed, and most of society believed that, right? When we first discovered Twitter and Facebook. So we can't really, we need to be careful here when we talk about like sort of the goodness or the badness of these figures in Silicon Valley. I think what you can say now, though, is that we know what the effects of them have been. And so the fact that we continue to met this psychological damage onto people in the form of these social media platforms, these engagement algorithms, the ad-based funding model that we use on the internet that we know is like fucking us up. There does come a point when you're like, well, like, when are we going to stop? When are we going to stop doing this? Like, we keep doing it because it serves shareholder interests, and we're addicted to it. But it's bad. We know it's bad. We're poisoning our brains. Like the juries. Jonathan Haidt writes about this. The anxious generation. Like we know this, right? The epistemic crisis. I write about this. It isn't an open question whether algorithmic content and social media has fucked up our brains. It has. We know this. It's a problem. In fact, we're getting dumber. IQ rates are dropping. We're making ourselves dumb. We're flattening, thought and moral distinctions. uh, and turning us into these like completely like commodified things. We've commoditized our own attention. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. So, is AI influencing people? I mean, yeah, it is. It's influencing all of us. It's influencing. The solution here, right? I mean, is a sort of the old sort of adage of like learning to think for yourself. That's what I'm like trying like to do. That's like my stance, right? At Notes from the Circus. I'm not so much talking about what political opinions you have. Like, if you read me carefully, you'll note that like I don't really try to stake out strong positions on really any policy matter. I try to characterize the debate. I try to characterize what the important questions are. That's what I do. That's like, and I try to stay in that place as carefully as I can. Not because I don't have opinions on these things. I do. It's just that like I don't think that right now policy outcomes are our biggest problem. They're big problems, right? There's like serious material concerns, right? Like there are seriously people suffering out there. There's people who don't have healthcare who need it. There's people who don't have food who need it. All these things are true. We need to address these things. There are moral emergencies burning in all of these regards. But I mean, our capacity to address these problems is being systematically diminished by the destruction of the government's capacity in a fundamental way to address any policy challenge. Really, I mean, they're trying to sell the government off for parts and move it to the private sector. And what has the private sector done? We just talked about social media. Like the profit motive has not redounded to the interests of our collective psychological well-being. Like nobody can make that argument. It's fucked us up badly. This is a moral crisis, plain and simple. And so, so that's that's where, we have a follow up here, right? But Russia and China have AI that attacks our systems. Look, I mean, we should talk more about AI. I'm going to talk a lot more about AI in the coming weeks and months. In fact, I've said this before. When I first started Notes from the Circus, I had maybe a little bit of hope that Trump wouldn't win the election. I kind of like assumed that much of what I'd be writing about would be AI and ethics. And I have been writing about that in a kind of indirect way. Like my conversation, my focus on epistemology as sort of like really, sort of like the kind of the core domain that I philosophically interrogate is directly related to my concerns around AI and human agency, and the nature of the nature of control. Which these things are sort of like really central to like AI ethics. And I have like pretty developed views on those things. I've chosen though to really kind of focus on sort of the positive case for human agency, and I think you can kind of you can extract critiques of AI and the use of AI in political, cultural, and economic affairs from my positive case. I mean, I think the critiques. If you're reading me carefully enough, I think emerge quite fluidly from my positive case. But I'll make those critiques. I'll say, I'll get into them as I have time. I mean, I'm trying to like keep track of like 5 different threads in my head that I think are important things to talk about. I'm just one guy. I'm one guy. I mean, the tools that we have today, right? Like I can talk to you, I'm streaming live. I don't even really need that sophisticated equipment. Obviously, like LLMs are really great. They do help with writing. They help with sort of like ideation and really pushing through writer's block and things like that. And so, I'm not anti-AI, right? I mean, I want AI to cure cancer. I want AI to help teach our kids about the world. I want AI to serve human ends. I just don't want AI to make moral, ethical decisions for humans. That's sort of the nature of this AI alignment problem and the control problem, and that's my stance, right? I'm not a somebody who's like anti-technology. I think technology is great. I mean, like billions of people are alive today because of technology and would be dead if we didn't have technology. And I think that can be true of AI as well. But I mean, we have to take very seriously the moral and ethical dimensions of machines that can act of their own volition. That's dangerous, like automatically. I mean, it's dangerous to live among humans that can act of their own volition. I mean, and we've had to build like societies and laws and culture and these moral systems in order to sort of like contain that risk. And that is like even more true for autonomous machines. So these are important things that we need to be thinking about. Anyways, not sure if we have any more comments or questions in my remaining few minutes. Maybe keep this one to like 45 minutes today. I can hold out for, or maybe there were other questions I didn't see. So somebody says we have a plague on both the political houses. That's why I refuse to join either political party. Yeah, I mean, like, look, I mean, sure. I mean, I've been quite critical of the Democratic establishment right recently, but I mean, like, I would like crawl over broken glass to like vote for a Democratic politician against any Republican right now, and that's not because I'm a Democratic partisan. It's because at some fundamental level, like this is a constitutional moral emergency, and the idea that that they're both the same, so who cares what happens, is a complete moral abdication. That's a complete moral failure on your part if that's the position you take. Um, I mean, at some level, right? Like you have to have some kind of like affordance for pragmatism, at some point, right? Like, the liberals and the socialists fought on the same side in the Spanish Civil War. It didn't mean that they like got along, right? Like, in terms of their views on capitalism. But sometimes you got to like fucking pick a side. Like when the stakes become existential. I mean, this is just the morally mature thing to admit yourself. There's people who say, well, I mean, I shouldn't have to pick between two bad choices. We have to do that all the time. You have to choose like between dying from cancer or taking the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is not a good choice. I mean, at the end of the day, like, there's a basic game theory here around like survival and trying to like live to fight another day. And this idea that you can just excuse yourself from the fight because you don't like your options, like Jesus Christ, people need to like grow the fuck up. Anyways, that's where I will I will stop there. This was fun. I'll do more of these. Maybe I should like have people like pre-submit questions. That way they're like ready to go and I've thought about them. Anyways, thanks everyone, and I'll maybe we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.